Mr. Biddle, what lessons do you think the world learned from the Nuremberg trials?
Well, I think there's several. One is the value of freedom by showing what happens to civil rights and freedom under an autocracy like the Nazi regime. Another very valuable lesson is that what did happen was shown to the Germans, and I think the Germans have learned their lesson. They really, most of them, didn't know what was going on and the terror of it and how it was related to Hitler's regime.
Recently in Western Germany, we've seen the case of a newspaper publisher thrown in jail and it would appear denied his civil liberties. Do you have any fear for the status of civil liberties in Europe today?
No, I have no fear on a particular instance. Those things happen all the time. And when they begin to rise in number, it becomes serious. But I don't think that one instance really has much to be alarmed about.
About 10 years ago, you wrote a book called The Fear of Freedom, which I remember very well, and at that time you had some fear, I think, for the status of freedom in the United States. How do you view our civil liberties, our freedoms today?
Well, that was during the period of which is commonly known as McCarthyism. That, thank God, is in the past. I think it's possible that it could be stirred up again by fear. It always comes from fear. And by uncontrolled mob action in any case, and by the prejudice which leads to the persecution of races and religions. But certainly McCarthyism has taught us a lesson which I hope we will remember for a long while.
What do you think led us out of the McCarthy era?
Well, I think that any normal body, organism, recovers from a sickness, and we came round to being what I think we are, normal, decent Americans that care about the liberty of even people other than ourselves.
Mr. Biddle, should the American people face a future situation like the McCarthy era, what advice would you have for citizens then?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'd say that if they remember when they're tempted to get on board one of these bandwagons that's teaching hate and race prejudice, they should remember that fundamentally the spirit of this country is to have other people whose views you may not agree with treated the way you would like to be treated.
Drawing on your own experience as Attorney General, how do you view the role of the Justice Department today in some of its touchy cases, such as the integration cases in the South?
Well, I think the department has acted admirably under Bob Kennedy. The great thing about this situation, it seems to me, is never to forget that law must be enforced. And that was why I was so struck with that admirable statement of Governor Russell the other day, in which he said that he would enforce the law in a southern state. The minute the police stood by with their arms crossed and watched the Jews' stores being plundered without doing anything about it in Munich, one knew that that was the beginning of the torture and concentration camps.